All right, going live. Chapter 11. Why Rehab? Part 3. Rehab. Chapter 11. Why Rehab? Why you have to rehab. This chapter is about rehabbing. We're going to chop it into 3 smaller segments. We're going to focus on how rehabbing for your rental properties differs from how doing a major flip on a rehab or you rehab your own house. We'll discuss the differences and the reasons we make the decisions we do. You have 2 options. You can do all the work in the beginning when the unit is vacant, or you can do the minimal work to get it up to code. But then you're going to be coming back a lot to do repairs. We prefer to do all the necessary repairs right from the beginning. We're not able to eliminate maintenance altogether. However, our goal is to do as much as we can in the beginning to prevent or reduce maintenance down the road. It's a win-win situation. It's a win for you because you're not having to deal with a bunch of pesky repair calls, and it's a win for the tenant because your tenants don't want to deal with repairs and things breaking either. They would rather live and stay in a nice, clean place for the most part. The final win is for you again. The refinance portion of Brrrr is when you get your money back. You spend the money up front, and then when you refinance, you don't actually have as much money in the property anyways. Then you can cash flow with an asset with little to none of your own money invested in it while building equity. You might ask yourself, why would you invest more money into a property that you are going to have as a rental? Why not just buy a house that's already nice? And that's a great question. But before we jump into that, we want to recap what the Brrrr strategy is. It stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Every one of these steps in the process is very, very important. In order for you to rent out a property after you purchase it, 9 out of 10 times, you're going to have to rehab it in some regards by default just to get it to be rent ready or in rent ready condition. Not to mention, a big reason why we can buy properties as a discount is because they often need a lot of work. The rehab is also needed for you to get a refinance rate that is favorable, so you can continue the Brrrr strategy as planned. You have to rehab the property. You're buying a property that doesn't need a rehab. It's going to be very difficult to convince your banking partners to give you a refinance to where you can get all or most of your money back out. Let's say we purchased a property that needs some work. This is also a big part of why we can buy them at a discount, because they need rehabbing. It's really kind of a requirement for us to use the Brrrr strategy to its fullest potential. When we are able to buy a discounted or do a significant rehab, we're able to add value above and beyond just the material cost and effort put into these properties. For every dollar we put in, we're trying to get $2 in value, metaphorically speaking, out of it. Quick example. Say we buy a property that is a little 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. It's worth about $100,000 once it's fixed up. That's what other properties in the area are selling for when they're fixed up. We are able to buy it for $60,000. The kitchen is outdated, the bathroom is outdated, it looks pretty bad. So we're able to buy it at $60,000 off market. We have a couple of options. We can fluff it up, meaning we can do a quick rehab on it and maybe spend $20,000. So now we're going to be into the property for $80,000. It's going to be worth $100,000 on paper. That's a $20,000 equity capture. Preventative maintenance. Another reason to rehab is to make it a hassle-free unit. We've all heard the terminology of the 3 T's in the investing world. It's tenants, toilets, and taxes. Those are the 3 biggest hassles when you're a landlord and you own properties. Tenants are often a hassle because they may not pay rent or have other issues. When we say toilets, we're talking about the property maintenance. So our objective when rehabbing this unit is to make the house bulletproof. We want it to be hassle-free for years. We want surfaces that wipe down easily so they're easy to clean. We want things that work. If you go cheap with the lowest grade plumbing or electrical fixtures, it's probably going to be broken in about 4 months. A cheap shower head might start leaking and spray water before you know it. There are some things that it's worth it to spend a little extra money on to prevent a maintenance call down the road. Spending a couple extra bucks on a shower head or a toilet is going to save a lot of money and hassle in the long run than needing to send out a handyman or a plumber just to replace them. Nice place for tenants. As we have mentioned before, we are always trying to create win-win relationships. The same goes for relationships with our tenants. We are rehabbing the properties not only to get a favorable bank appraisal and refinance number, but also to create a nice place for the tenants to live. To us, nice means an updated home in an area they can afford to live. That's safe. Nice means we have less maintenance requests. This is a big one. Maintenance calls can be trouble for your bottom line and a big aggravation for tenants living in the houses. Think about it. You don't want to live in a house where things are constantly breaking down or are broken. When rehabbing houses, we like to bite the bullet and pay for things that we may make the home last longer without issues. These aren't necessarily the big value adds like remodeling a kitchen or a bathroom. We often don't knock out walls. To us, nice frequently including putting a new roof or getting trees around the house trimmed so they're not a nuisance. We also opt for less expensive cosmetic updates to kitchens and baths. We can think this through a couple different ways. Scenario 1, we replace the floor and have the trees trimmed around the house at a time of rehab. If you live in the Midwest like us, it could be important to have a sump pump and a drain tile put in the basement if we see some evidence of water in the basement. We might do a light fluff up on the bathroom and the kitchen and put new luxury vinyl flooring throughout the home. We'll paint the walls and update the light fixtures. Then when we refinance the property, we'll get most or all of our money back for the rehab. So it might seem like we're putting a lot of money into a rental rehab, but we don't really come out of pocket for these bigger ticket items anyway. A few months later, a storm could come in and we won't get any calls about the property. We can save our energy to continue looking for our next rental property to buy. Scenario number 2. We gut the kitchen and we put in new cabinets with granite countertops and high-end appliances. We put in high-end solid wood floors and decide to gut the bathrooms as well. This is a common mistake for newbies. If it's your first rehab, you probably want to make it look great. It's common to blow your budget on high-end fixtures with this approach. Now, you might be thinking you don't need to replace the floor or trim the trees around the house. If a storm rolls through, a branch could fall on the roof, putting a hole in the roof. Now the tenant's possessions are damaged by water from the storm. They're not happy about it, and we want you to pay for the damage, TV, furniture, or whatever else they may own that got damaged. Now you have to get a hole in the roof repaired. You have to fix the drywall ceiling, make sure there's no water damage to the insulation in the attic or damage to the floor and the walls itself, plus paint. You might have gotten most of your cash back when you refinanced. However, if you blew your budget on a bathroom and a kitchen remodel, your house is over-improved for the area and it won't have much equity left. The roof, the tree removal, and other fixes that you'd have to make as a result of the storm damage now come out of your pocket. It'll take years of more rent to make up the extra improvements you did by not prioritizing them in the first place. These fixes will now have to be done on short notice. Your tenants won't like the intrusion into their homes and their life. So this is just one example of how a long-term owner is going to look at rehabbing versus a short-term flipper. A Brrrr investor, you want to think about long-term solutions when you are rehabbing the house. It's about making a secure and nice place to live. You're not on TV trying to maximize the wow factor. And you're not trying to put lipstick on a pig either. You're in it for the long haul, and you need to do things right. Do the not so fun things now so you don't get stuck the really not so fun things later. Appraisal and refinancing. The quality of your rehab has a lot to do with your appraisal. If you only spend $3 to $5,000 on a rehab, the appraiser might not see that much of an improvement was done. They're comparing your home to others in similar condition. Their opinion of value of the home might not be high enough for you to get all of your money back out when you refi. So we try to spend at least $15,000 on our rehabs, which is also known in the banking world as achieving an entrepreneurial credit. Our bankers tell us their requirements for the entrepreneurial credit. Your banker may have a different requirement, so before you get started, make sure you tell them you're using the Brrrr Strategy. You can even tell them you've learned about this strategy from David and Mike at the Discount Property Investor podcast. Maybe they'll listen too. If they don't know much about this strategy now, they will soon learn about it. Most bankers are pretty familiar with the Brrrr Strategy though. In order for them to give you a loan based on the appraisal, the bankers have to consider an entrepreneurial credit. Without spending about $15,000, the bank might just refinance the property for what you have into it, which is the purchase plus the fixed up costs and the repairs. An entrepreneurial credit is banking language for the underwriters to do their due diligence and pay out properly, which is on the appraised amount. So there's a big difference between getting a loan on the all-in amount versus the appraised amount, and that's where the entrepreneurial credit comes in. It takes time to develop a relationship with a bank. If you're just starting out with this, you might not be able to get that credit right away. It took us at least 10 houses before our banker told us about this. It's kind of a hidden secret among bankers. It's definitely worth asking about when you are shopping around for your local banker. We didn't even realize what they were doing. They were looking at the appraisal. They always have to look at the appraisal. Then they look at what we bought it for and how much money we had put into the rehab. They want to know all the details. So then they can figure out what to lend on the property. And it can take a while to build up a relationship before they trust that you know what you are doing. They kind of need proof. They need a track record of payments. They're building trust with your bank. It may take 5 to 10 units before the bank no longer looks at you as high risk. Now, as long as we can prove we've spent $15,000 on the rehab, they're more willing to look past all the minor due diligence issues. Now they lend on the value of the appraisal and the appraisal only. A lot of times, we don't even want the full amount that they will lend us because we want to keep our equity and our cash flow high. We just need to pay back our lenders for the purchase and the rehab. And that's why this strategy is so beautiful. You're not going to be able to refinance a property if it's already fixed up. Typically, when you get a loan from a bank on an investment property, it's not a primary residence. It's not even a secondary home. It's an investment property. And they're going to give you a loan based upon the purchase price and the cost of these renovations. However, if you spend at least $15,000, or at least with our banking partners, they can look beyond those two numbers. Now they're able to lend on the appraised price. And this is huge. It's almost magical. This is another one of those things that makes real estate such an amazingly powerful tool. Rental rehab versus retail rehab. We want to explain the difference between some repair items that often get thrown around and used interchangeably. We want to make the distinction as to why these terms are actually different and how that applies to Brrrr and why we choose the repairs that we make. Restoration. This entails bringing the house back to its original condition. This is expensive and not necessary for what we do. This is typically done when taking a really old house and restoring it to its historical time period. Remodel. This is changing the structure of the home and often changing the use of a room or building. Walls might be torn out, plumbing, electrical work, or air ducts might be moved. An addition may be added. This type of work is very expensive and doesn't really fit into our strategy either. Rehabbing, taking an old, outdated house and making it more functional and livable for modern use. The idea is to make it nice and functional, not completely change what's already there. Rehab costs vary in cost and quality. As we mentioned with our description of Class A, B, C, and D areas, the idea is to keep the quality in line with the typical houses in the neighborhood already. Because we're doing a quick rental fluff up, we're going to spend a bit less money than a full-blown gut rehab or remodel. The house is going to be used by a renter as opposed to a new home buyer. We're not going to do all the same things that we would for a rehab project. We're looking to sell at a retail price. We're going to make it look good, but it doesn't have to be perfect. We're fine if it's a bit of an older roof. We don't necessarily have to replace the roof, yet we should still get a pretty similar good appraisal value on it. Whereas if we're going to sell it, we might have to replace that roof. A 15-year-old roof probably still has half of its life. However, a new homeowner or inspector might point out that it's old and that it needs to be replaced. And there are just significant differences where you can add value to a property. We want to clarify, we are not encouraging you to cut corners on costly repairs now. If you own the house for 15 to 20 years, you're most likely going to have to put that roof on at some point. So if it is showing real signs of water or wear and or tear, do it now. You might as well do it now so you can refinance that cost out. However, if it still looks good and has no evidence of leaks or roof failure, keep it. Why spend the money when you don't need to? The grade of the rehab is also very important. It's going to affect the decision you make if you are buying a property to flip, meaning you're going to rehab it and sell it retail. Then it needs to be a higher quality rehab. You're probably going to need to swap out the kitchen cabinets, but when you're dealing with a rental property, you're more concerned with the condition than the style. So instead of ripping those cabinets out, you could paint them or add in new hardware to them. With rental rehabs, there's definitely corners you can cut or costs that you can avoid that make sense. We've just walked through one of our properties yesterday where the cabinets looked great. However, we looked underneath the sink and it was all rotted because it was a rental. We decided not to replace the entire cabinet. We're going to find and fix the leak, cut out the boards underneath the sink, and replace those boards with new ones. Once we paint them, they'll look brand new. We've actually seen some use plastic trays with PVC as a cheap and easy fix to rotted cabinet boards. There's a lot of little tips and tricks to save money. We're not saying you can cut corners to deliver less than a quality product. However, it is not necessary to spend crazy money on a rental property either. These properties are going to be tenant-occupied properties. There are some tips and tricks that go into rehabbing these properties. You want them to be nice, but you don't want them to overdo them. You want to use materials that will stand the test of time. Select neutral colors that make them look clean. Use the same color for walls and the same color for trim and doors. We use a new gray for walls and a white semi-gloss for trim and doors. We suggest you keep the same paint color code for all of your rentals. It just makes it easy. And this will make it easy to turn over a unit when a vacancy happens. Having the same paint can save you from having to repaint an entire house or maybe just touch up a few spots. You always want durable materials that can withstand several tenants for several years to save you the cost of having to do this every couple of years. For instance, the new luxury vinyl floors we've been using for years, we would expect will last several tenants before we have to replace them. While carpet may be cheaper today, it would cost us longer vacancy time when we have to turn over the property down the road. There would be more of an out-of-pocket cost with each turnover. You also want materials that won't be outdated in 2 to 3 years. We select neutral colors and styles as much as we can. Remember, you are not trying to create a space you love and want to love and or live in. You want to update the house and make it look modern. Occasionally, if we see a discounted item or out-of-box material at a steep discount, we may go for that. If we can get a higher end product like a solid wood vanity, for instance, at the same cost or less than the cheaper particle board options at most big box hardware stores, then we'll choose that option. Same thing goes for light fixtures. We love getting ceiling fans in rentals because we can find really good deals on them. And they seem to be a bit of a luxury in some areas or for some rentals. A $59 ceiling fan at Lowe's, maybe $30 more than the globe light, but adds a bit of value. It comes back to us with a higher rent and a higher appraisal on those properties. One ceiling fan might not make a difference, but the entity of the finished project that will make a difference. The entirety, I'm sorry. If you like shopping for bargains, this can be one of the more fun parts of the job. It's really fun finding good deals on these items. Know your area. Know your area, guys. Why does that matter? Well, as we mentioned, our goal is to do a rehab to increase the property value. The appraiser is going to look at comparable properties in the neighborhood. Every city in America is going to have nice parts of town and it's going to have lower end parts of town. So you want a rehab to match the condition of the homes in that area that you are going to comp out higher. For example, in St. Louis, Missouri, the area called North County is a really great for rental properties. The numbers seem to work there more than any other part of the metro St. Louis area. When we buy these houses, we're not spending $50 or $80K on the rehabs. We're generally spending $15 to $25K on average. Other areas will require a more expensive rehab to get a property to be the same conditions as its neighbors. The reason we buy in North County and South City areas is in these areas we can buy, rehab, and rent with numbers that work really well for us. We use 100K ARV as an easy numbers example on the podcast all the time. However, that's not too far off from where we're looking. We usually buy properties with ARVs between 90 and 120,000 after we're looking to purchase them around 45 to 70K. As the market continues its slow rise, we have to get more creative on finding deals and rehabbing for most cost-effective value addition. When rehabbing for retail sale, the quality of the rehab can vary compared to a buy and hold rental rehab. Typically, we stay away from the low and the high-end rentals and shoot for the mid-grade rehabs. This is more likely those B and those C-grade properties that we talked about before. We will do some extra things like put cages on the exterior AC units or on the C-grade properties and on multifamily properties in C-grade areas. This is just protection to keep them from getting stolen. In these rougher areas, we put up video monitoring systems. By that, we mean we put up fake video cameras with a flashing light and some signs that say premises under video surveillance, which you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's. We stay away from the D-grade areas altogether. No amount of precautions are really going to secure your property in those areas. The way we look at it, if you wouldn't want to live in the area because of high theft and crime, then you don't want to invest there either. Your bank probably won't want too much debt in that area as well. On the flip side, we also don't invest in Class A areas because those rentals won't build wealth or create good cash flow as well as a B or C. With A-class properties, we typically cannot buy, rehab, and make sufficient cash flow while leaving little to none of our money in the deal after the Brrrr strategy. Those are okay if you're leaving lots of money in the house or have different objectives than us. Those properties may make sense to rehab and for a retail sale. Nicer or more expensive areas may make sense for you depending on your goals. Know your numbers. Hate to beat a dead horse here, folks, but it all comes back to knowing your numbers. Whether it's wholesaling, rehabbing, or renting, it's difficult to be successful if you don't know your numbers. Wholesaling is a great way to cut your teeth and learn your numbers. When other people are walking through properties with you or give you feedback on pricing and condition, you'll find out really quickly whether your numbers are accurate or not. The hard truth is, until you do your first rehab or two, you just don't have real-world experience on how repair costs seem to add up. And man, they add up quick. Our goal is to provide you with as much value as we can and hopefully keep you from making the bigger and more costly mistakes. We want to have a rent that is going to pay the mortgage, the property manager, taxes, insurance, and save up for a repair reserve or vacancies. We just want to make a little bit of cash when it's all said and done. If we take out a really big mortgage, we may not be able to have that cash flow. So it doesn't make sense from our perspective either to borrow more than we need. All of these numbers have to balance out. The purchase and the rehab, i.e. all the costs, the monthly mortgage and expense, and the rent collected. It's a balancing game, guys. If you go over your rehab number, can you make it up with a little higher rent? If not, maybe you have to leave a little bit of money in the property. By taking out a smaller loan on refi to decrease the monthly payment, in order to figure out where your money is going and try to stay on budget, you want to set a priority list for projects. Figure out what is absolutely needed for the occupancy permit. And if you need to get an occupancy inspection in your area, make sure you have a firm bids on or have the work completed first. For example, the electric service line to the house may be hanging too low. If it's under 10 feet high, it's going to feel like you can reach up and touch it. And that's something that you have to take care of. It's not fun money to spend, but it's absolutely necessary. So first, take care of the safety and occupancy items. Then take care of the deferred maintenance items like a leaky roof or an old HVAC system. It's also not fun rehabbing those things because they can be expensive, but they will cut down on maintenance calls later on. Finally, you can get to work on cosmetic improvements, paint, light fixtures. These are inexpensive and make things look a lot better. Next in your budget would be the big items like flooring, kitchen cabinets, and bathroom updates. A recent property we rehabbed, we estimated the cost of a rehab. It happened to us too. We bought an older home that needed siding and a new roof, and we spent almost double what we thought we would spend on those items. And quite often, old houses are built with different construction quality than you're expecting. It's easy to get burned when things don't go the way you planned. It was one thing after another, and it ate up almost all of our budgets. So instead of doing full gut in the bathroom and the kitchen, we had to cut something out. Instead of having our floors professionally sanded and refinished, we bought a product called Minwax Polystain, which is a stain and polyurethane combination. We had our painters clean the floors and paint it on. The floors turned out okay. They're not great, but it cost about $500 instead of the typical $2,000 to sand, stain, and seal. This is just one thing we did to get back on budget. We used old appliances from another project we had going. We didn't remove an old shed from the backyard, and we didn't put up a fence around the yard. All these things are minor, and like mentioned above, we got a new roof on, and this should prevent future issues and damages to the property. Let's recap. Why you have to rehab. For the Brrrr method model to work, you have to rehab. Most properties sold at a discount are in some disrepair. This gives you the opportunity to do some preventative maintenance and raise the value of the property at the same time. Number 2, preventative maintenance. We're investing in long term, and it's easier to do necessary maintenance up front to avoid problems down the road or in the future. Number 3, nice place for tenants. We seek win-win relationships in every aspect of our business, and this includes our tenants. We consider them to be clients and want them to have a nice place so they'll be clients for longer. Number 4, appraisal and refinancing. It's important to fix the property up in such a way that you increase the appraisal value while keeping enough equity to refinance. You want to back your lenders. Spending about $15,000 allows us to get the entrepreneurial credit. Number 5, rental rehab versus retail rehab. It is important to match your rehab to other houses in the area. We've also rehabbed to hold long-term rather than for a quick flip for cash. Number 6, know your area. Class A or high-end areas tend not to cash flow well. Class D, low-end areas often are more trouble than they're worth. Class B and C areas are the Goldilocks zone, so find the areas that work for you and your numbers. Number 7, know your numbers. Brrrr is a balancing act. You need to buy at a discount and stay on budget to pull your money out. The property also has to cash flow after the refinance. Action item: have a plan in place for rehab projects. What kind of numbers do you need to get for Brrrr to work for you and in your area? Create a simple Excel spreadsheet and get comfortable with different calculations and the balancing act of getting the numbers right. Ask other investors how much they spend on their properties as well as their rehabs and what kind of cash flow they're receiving after refinancing in your area so you can get acquainted. Every master was once a disaster. T. Harv Eker.